Hello, Alexandra here. This channel is for stage green folks wanting to move to stage yellow in spiral dynamics and teal in integral. And today I'm going to talk about the differences between stage green and stage turquoise. Sometimes when folks start to get interested in spiral dynamics or integral, they are at stage green, but they might confuse themselves with being at stage turquoise. So let's make sure we know the differences, because you want to know what stage you're actually at so you can work in that stage, work on yourself, watch the videos, read books like Spiral Dynamics by Don Beck and Christopher Cohen, and watch videos. Nomali Pereira has great videos, Ken Wilber, Susanne-Cook Greuter. I like Leo at actualize.org and Chris at Shores of Infinity, so you can just have more insight and develop yourself according to the stage you're actually at. So I'm going to go through entering green, stabilizing in green, and exiting green, and then compare it to turquoise so you can see for yourself what the differences are and what you've experienced. I'm going to use the book Spiral Dynamics to talk about entering green. So I'm going to paraphrase, but I'm reading out of the book. Entering green is still a little bit at orange, and they're still unwilling to commit fully to, quote, let it all hang out. The orange needs for control limit the openness and trust in a conversation. Greens are very communitarian, and also they are very much concerned about current events and world events, and very much concerned about folks that are marginalized or poor or, in disadvantaged places in the world. So that's a way you can tell. All of that was a descriptor of sort of entering stage green. When you get to full-on stage green, they're very egalitarian. They're less individualistic and more other-centric and supportive of others. They're a little bit mellower than stage orange, and the competitiveness of stage orange yields to themes of sharing, understanding, appreciation, and tolerance. I just today was talking to a friend at mid-stage green. Here is a great example of full-on stage green values. We were on Zoom, and she showed me a letter she's writing to a relative, a family member in jail, maybe sort of a distant family member, but she grew up with this person, and he's in jail for something. It's a very uncomfortable topic. I'll just leave it at that. And I asked her how she reconciled that and how she was able to write this letter and show compassion. And her answer was, who am I to judge? I'm not perfect. I know I'm not perfect. And then we talked about how unfortunate and awful it is that the prison system is punitive and doesn't rehabilitate folks, because a lot of people in prison are there. If you've studied internal family systems and you've done parts work, you know that it's because of parts of them that are not integrated, that are not healed. And I've seen on videos on YouTube where internal family systems therapists have worked with folks that have done things that are pretty awful, and actually help that person heal that part and help, for lack of a better term, rehabilitate that person if we're talking about someone who's committed a crime. So the topic of who am I to judge, and the fact that stage green is the stage that will stand up and try to advocate for fairness and justice, and that you have a prison system that's not effective, and you have people falsely accused because they couldn't afford a good lawyer. So all of this activism around prison reform is coming out of stage green. So stage green has the heightened empathy, and they really do have an empathy for the underdog, and have reconciled and come to an empathy for folks that have done things maybe a lot of people would not be able to reconcile. So the exiting green phase is where there's a surge of personal power and sort of the individualism comes back. It's a more practical phase, a more grounded stage, and very much more effective, as I've mentioned many times in previous videos, more integrated. They still transcend and include the compassion of stage green, but it's just an easier stage because they've done a lot of inner work and their lives are just a little bit easier because green is such a sensitive stage. So green also does spirituality and can do meditation, and they're into things like tai chi sometimes, yoga, and the things that bring about harmony and peace. Sometimes they get into new agey stuff and sort of have these numinous experiences. That, when we're getting to confusing green and turquoise, is actually different than turquoise. Turquoise is seen sort of as the stage of, a lot of times, it just depends on the person and how they live the stage of turquoise, but very much of a stage where there's a lot of ways to describe it. You feel like you're being held by the all. You feel like it's a no self kind of stage, a stage where you feel in communion. It feels very good. It's a stage of love, and I'm talking about very much stabilizing turquoise to late turquoise. And it's even the stage where some of the religions would call it mystical union, or maybe Buddhism would call it sort of non-duality. So this is a stage, a turquoise. Greens are still developing their authenticity, heightening their authenticity, becoming even more authentic, and they're exploring their inner worlds. Turquoise is no longer developing their identity. They've realized their identity is completely constructed, and they're going into dismantling the identity, and they don't experience the concept that identity is a construct. They have the lived experience that identity is a construct, and that is very, very different. So the sense of self, the sense of identity drastically diminishes, and they may feel even a transpersonal or a transhuman type of love channeling through them, sort of a mystical union type of thing. And of course turquoise is on a continuum too, so entering turquoise you may feel it some, and then by the time you are exiting turquoise, this is a lot. And also when someone stabilizes in turquoise, they're not going to fall out of this state very easily, whereas green sort of has these numinous experiences, and they tend to crash out of them because green is still needing to do a lot of inner work and work on the shadow, whereas turquoise has been doing that since they were at stage green, and they've had olive stage green, olive stage yellow, early turquoise, so a couple of decades even. If they're progressing through the stages, it could be longer. Everyone progresses at different paces and at a different pace, and then of course sometimes people will just max out a stage and stay there for the rest of their lives. But usually people who are at green, if you want to work on it and you want to work on yourselves, there's no reason you can't progress through the stages. There's no reason you can't make it to stage yellow and turquoise eventually, if you're working on yourself and you're using your professional resources like counseling or 12-step or parts work. It really does take a lot of personal work. Also things like meditation help, and definitely watching videos about stage green and stage yellow and the stages help online for sure. So I hope you found this useful. Sending you love and blessings, and see you in the next video.